Hey, hello. So what I'm going to be doing today is I'll be explaining about leg length differences, why one leg can be shorter or longer than the other, where this discrepancy comes from, and of course how we can solve it going forward. Now, something whether you've been to a chiropractor, a physiotherapist, or even maybe, as one of my patients, this is where a question comes from, one of our patients, as one of our patients said their mum noticed they had a difference in the length of their legs. One of the reasons that this happens is because there is a structural change in the body. So when we have these changes in the length of the legs, what it may appear as from the outside or even for ourselves is that literally, like it sounds, one leg is shorter or longer than the other one. And what it can start to do is we may start to notice this on certain movements that we do especially. So say if we're walking, we may notice that we step more on one side. I used to work with runners and we used to see they used to have wearing more on the bottom of their shoes more on one side as well. All of these different factors will start to be noticed, and this will give you this inclination that there is this difference in the length of the legs. Now, of course, one of the big questions would be why. Now, there's two different ways that we can have this. This can be what we call structural or what we call functional. So we'll go first through the structural. The structural can be if there's literally a difference in the length of the legs. If there is for some reason maybe an abnormality, it could be congenital, maybe what we mean from birth, it could be due to an injury, it could be due to other structural changes throughout the body, such as if there has been, say, something happening in the ribs and things have been shifted up to the top. One example of this is when I was working back in UK, I had a patient coming in, and as for all patients, to see if there is effects throughout the body, I was checking the length of his legs, and there was a difference for him of 3 to 4 inches. When I talked to him, he explained, which never came up in the history, this is because I actually had an accident. I was in a car accident a number of years ago, and they literally had to take out part of his leg because of an injury. This would be a very, very true structural change, as well as like we see for children, if there's been any change in the length of the legs, such as if they've had a problem maybe when they were younger, maybe they've had a little injury or a break, or even if there's been some developmental issue, especially in the hip, they may all develop what we call a congenital change. This would be something that produces a real, true structural change in the body. However, the more common thing that we see for most people is what's known as a functional change. And the functional change is something that's then been affected by our lifestyles. It's something that can be affected by, say, if we sit a certain way, we move a certain way, we have certain habits or patterns that we keep repeating, and they will then force the body in a certain direction. One way to think about this is kind of like, say, if you went to the gym and you always worked out one arm, but you never worked out the other arm. Of course, over time, one arm will be bigger or stronger than the other arm, and it will start to look different than the other one will as well. And it's the same thing, if we always have a preference, maybe we stand more on one side, we lean more on one side, it will start to have an effect. One of the most common things that I see though quite a lot with our patients is that we see there is a change in the length of the legs, however it's not something that is completely linked to what's happening in the legs itself. So in terms of these structural ones, of course there's something that's really a change in the leg, that's something that, to be honest, cannot be changed or cannot be fixed. However, if there is a functional change, this can be affected by usually one of two key areas. Either something happening up here or something happening down here. So we'll start first with what's going on, say, in that lower part of the body. If someone has more of a change in, say, the hips, maybe a rotation, maybe they have a change in the lower part of the spine, this can be something that is then pulling around and changing the length of those legs and affecting how long or short one will be compared to the other. However, this is something that usually only truly happens at this lower area if there's maybe, again, something that's actually slightly more of a structural change, such as a change in the hip, or if it's due to an injury. So say, for me, I used to play rugby, and there was points where, say, someone may tackle you and you may fall, and you, of course, maybe on your buttocks. At that point, it is likely that it may be something in this lower region which is affecting those body parts. However, the most common thing I see for people who don't have injuries and who don't have any congenital structural changes is that this functional change is happening more due to what's happening in the upper part, especially in their upper neck. One of the ways to understand this is that the top of your neck contains an area called the brainstem. It runs through the center. You have a hole about this big, and all the information from the brain has to pass through that part in the neck, just kind of between your ears, before it gets to the rest of the body. And in this area, the brainstem, it's not just this kind of choke point where all the information passes, it's also where you have some of the main control centers, including for your breathing, your heart rate, your immune response, and your digestion. So if there is a choke on that area, your body naturally is going to do anything it can to change the position at this level to take that pressure off. One way to think of it is like, say, if someone grabs you by the wrist and you say in a very uncomfortable position, maybe it's pressing hard on the bone, it doesn't feel good. You'll move your wrist in any way you can to make it slightly more comfortable. You may not be able to get out of the grip of their hand, but you can make it more comfortable in that meantime, even if it means your hand is now in a different position or posture than it would have been before. Your body will do the same thing, except it will do this by reducing the tension on the nerve system, especially at that brainstem. What this practically looks like is if there's a problem up here, and say there is that choking point where it's going to start to now press more on the nerves, your body may do something like this. You may tilt your head. But the problem is that nobody walks around just with a tilted head, because everything would look strange, everything would be out of balance, the horizon would be off. So instead, when people have this change, they then will compensate by bringing their shoulders. So now the head is nice and straight because that's something we all want to have done. However, but now the shoulders are off. But the shoulders then, of course, are not just a floating part of the body. They're not just connected to the neck, they're connected to your upper spine. So now, as I'm going from here, this changes, and if you watch that tick, you may notice it starts to rotate as well, which means that now it's starting to affect my upper spine. As the upper spine moves, again, it's not just connecting in that area, it's going to start to transfer and affect down to your lower body. So as I start here, I bring things across, and as you can see, these ripples start to come across on the t-shirt because it's now starting to affect what's happening in the lower spine. The lower spine, again, is connected to your hips, and they're connected to the legs. So even something as small as what seems small and insignificant as a change at the top of the neck will then transfer through the shoulders, the mid-spine, the upper spine, the lower spine, the hips, all the way down to the length of the legs. As an example, if you imagine that this foam roll is a bit like your spine. If we have a change at the top, it starts to affect what happens down here as well. Except your body's a bit smarter there. It won't all move in one direction because then you would just fall over. Instead, what happens is you'll make compensations all the way through to keep you standing. It's kind of like, say, if I take a very, very heavy case, like say if you're going on a holiday, which I know a lot of us aren't at the moment, but say if you're at the airport, you have a very, very heavy suitcase, and when you try to pick it up, you don't just pick it up straight, you maybe change your posture. You do something to counterbalance that. And it's the same thing for the body, to prevent you from falling over, but to also make sure that there is not this pressure at that top area. Your body will make these compensations and changes all the way through the rest of the body. Practically, again, what this means is it may start to change someone's posture all the way through. It could cause problems such as scoliosis. And one of the things that will happen as well is it can start to cause these other symptoms for people as well. And this is where it kind of gets a bit confusing for some, because they look at this as, I have a problem here, why do I feel nothing here but I feel something in my low back? It's because your body's making a compensation here because in many respects this area is more important. It's controlling things like your digestion and immune response, which overall your body sees as something more important than having legs that are as even as each other, or even having other problems like low back pain, or even at an extreme, not even being able to use your legs. The importance always has to be for the most vital area, and your body is very efficient at doing so. So if there is this change here, it will do everything it can to take that pressure off, even if it means being the lesser of evils and causing a problem somewhere else. So it's very common that if somebody has had no injuries, no congenital issues, but has something like low back pain, maybe pain down their leg, sciatica, this may be caused by something happening in the top part of the neck. And it's very normal that if somebody has been through, say, another realm of other doctors, physiotherapists, masseurs, maybe even going to chiropractors, and they've had less response, it may be that the missing aspect is what's going on at the top area and how that triggers all the way down. Thanks everybody for watching. If you have any questions, of course, you can put them into the comments and I'll reply as soon as I can. Or you can always WhatsApp me on 8438-9550 or email help@vitalitychiropracticcenters.com and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Have a great public holiday, everybody.